Part 3, design thinking. So let's jump right into that. Design thinking is really about prototyping your business idea. I particularly like to draw a from this when we are doing planning, whether that's a sprint planning or that's the planning phase while we're doing waterfall, plan. But here I really would love to encourage people to prototype their business idea. Don't fall in love with the first one because it might not be the best one. And also, we want to validate some of those assumptions with our customers before we go out and spend a whole pile of money on this one particular solution. So design thinking is really an approach to a problem where ideation, implementation, and inspiration work together. It's not linear, it's all working together. So here's another way to look at it. It's like, well, what if? What if we did this? So it draws upon logic, imagination, intuition, systemic reasoning, all these different things together. And it gets very, very messy during the research part. And then you start, the concept and prototyping, and then you're going to get clearer and clearer as more. But I particularly like this. Well, what if? What if? And always challenge you to say, well, what if? What if we looked at a different type of model, especially if we were using some of the canvases like the business model canvas? It's like, well, what if? What if we changed the business model? What if we did a reoccurring revenue? What if we changed our partnership? What if we changed this? What if we changed that? But I have found that this is incredibly effective working with dev teams. And when we want to find a solution, is to get them to really think a little bit outside of the box and what if. And then we will kind of get into this whole idea of divergent thinking, coming up with lots and lots of ideas, and then based on a certain criteria, do we converge and get to the better solutions for the problem that we've identified. So one of my great friends, Alexander Osterwalder, who was the guy who created or co-created the business model canvas, says, first of all, you want to think like a surgeon. Make sure that you've got the right tool and it's super sharp. Then you want to think like an architect. And that's what he means, like prototyping, not falling in love with the first one. Architects will do many, many prototypes and drafts before they actually start building. And then finally, think like a scientist. And that's that experimentation and that validation. So it's always this circular situation where you want to empathize and really understand what the customer is going through, then help define that problem. And I think, I'm going to share with you something that I think is so important, because very often you want to make sure that you're solving the right problem before you start problem solving. So then you come into your ideation where you come up with lots of ideas, prototype, test. And when you're testing it with the customer, you're again seeing how they empathize with that. So here's another framework for creativity and innovation. So define the opportunity, gather the data, question the assumptions, and reframe if need be, incubate or come up with lots of ideas and even more ideation, illumination, then evaluate and refine them, prototype them, assess them, implement, and iterate. So it is going to be an ongoing iterative process. But when you do come up with the solution, that's when you can move forward. So what I want to share with you is the CPSI model, or the creative problem solving model, and why I like this so much. This actually comes from the work of CPSI, which is the Creative Problem Solving Institute. It's been around for over 60 years. It's kind of like the grandfather of all creative thinking and innovation, very, very big in the innovation space. And so here's a model, and why I like it so much is number one is clarify. And within the clarification, we're going to actually look at 3 different exercises that you can get to that have this divergent and convergent thinking to make sure that you're solving the right problem before you start solving the problem. Then you ideate, develop, and implement. And the develop and implement, I think, we're all probably really good as project managers, but I do want to kind of go through this with you and see how much fun it can be to clarify, ideate, develop, and implement. So again, I talked about divergent and convergent. So divergent is just coming up with as many different ideas from all sorts of, different games and tools and things that you can do. Then based on a certain criteria, use that criteria to then get down and converge and get into that convergence, which is the final solutions that are the right solutions. So when you're doing divergent thinking, deferred judgment, it's kind of like brainstorming, build on ideas, seek wild ideas, go for quantity. And there's all sorts of fun little games that you can play with pictures and all sorts of things to get people thinking differently. For instance, I have like these amazing cards from the Creative Institute, and they're just pictures. And then what you do is you give them out to a bunch of different people, and they have two completely different, and you see if you can't find some commonality in there that will help you solve the problem. I'll show that to you in a little bit. And then your convergent guidelines are just to be very deliberate, check your objectives. What is it that you want? Improve on your ideas, be affirmative, and consider novelty, like what's going to be different and what's going to really help solve this problem. So here's the process, the clarify. As I was saying, there's actually 3 steps. So you explore the vision and you identify the goal or the wish or the challenge. And there's very specific languaging that you use when you're doing the CPS process. Then you gather all your data and then you formulate your challenges. So that is the kind of final step in the clarification, is having this challenge statement, which is going to be the thing that you ideate, develop, and implement from. So the first one is explore the vision, gather the data, and formulate the challenge. So when you're exploring the vision, the first thing is, it would be great if, I wish this. And that's where you start with that very first one. And again, you're gonna, do all your divergent thinking, come up with lots of ideas, and then based on what you want to achieve, then you do your convergent thinking. Then you go into the next round, which is select a wish or a goal statement, and you use the tool 3 I's. So influence, is it your responsibility, interest, and imagination. So those are some of the things that you can help use to define your wish or goal statements. Then you want to gather all the data, who, what, why, when, where, how, all that kind of stuff, and gather it. And now you can take step 1 and 2 and you formulate the challenge. And there's it works really well with invitational language. And especially when you're working with teams, I will encourage you again to use that invitational language as opposed to mandate language. So if people feel like they've been invited into the helping to create the solution, they're going to be much more vested than if you just tell them what to do. And that goes back to what I was saying before, how important it is to have like a driving statement, that like, why are we doing this, and putting it in context. And so that's all part of being very invitational. So how to, how might, in what ways? And then you want to turn some of that data into challenge statements, not ideas, but definition of the real challenge: broad, brief, and beneficial. So those are the kind of 3 things. So how might we, how, in what ways, and that's how you define your challenge statement. So here's the characteristics of a good challenge statement. Statement starter, begin with the how might I, how to, who's the owner, what's the verb, and what's the objective. So we don't have enough money. How to raise the money. It's too expensive. How might we reduce the cost? We need to be more innovative. How might we build a culture of innovation? So as you can see, that's the format for a good challenge statement. Once you have your challenge statement and you know what the problem is that you're going to solve, then you can get into the ideation, explore ideas, think up options, explore new combinations, build on ideas. There's lots and lots of fun exercises within this school of thought. Unfortunately, because this is a remote webinar. If we were in person, we would be playing games and doing some of these exercises all the way along, and you could actually be experiencing it. But I hope you're finding this interesting. So here's a fun one. It's called brain writing. So you just take a sheet and split it into 9 sections. First person fills it the row, and then you throw it on, and the other person, and then and it's really interesting. And you grab someone else's sheet and you build on their ideas, and then you shuffle it again, and you do this 3 different times, and you come up with some really cool ideas. Here's another tool called Scamper. So what if we substituted or combined or adapted or modified or put to other uses or eliminate? So this is also, again, kind of fun way to think differently. Scamper. Um, this is the thing that I was talking about just before, how you can take 2 obscure photos that have no words, nothing, they're just a photo. And what do you see? How does it make you feel? Is there any forced connection between the 2 of them? So this forced connection is a kind of fun way, and this is a twist on those forced connections. But for instance, I was working with some artists, and they were creating a new platform, and everybody got their pictures. And what was really cool was one person had a picture of a very young kid, and someone else had a picture of a very old man. And they, I challenged them to go together, not just do the forced connection between what they saw in their own 2 cards, but then I matched them up with other people. And the interesting thing was mentorship. They saw the old person and the young person, and they had never thought about mentorship on their platform for these different crafty type artists. So that's just like kind of one fun example of how this forced connection can. So then afterwards, you have your sorting criteria. What's the must criteria? What's the want criteria? And again, this is going to help you with your convergent thinking and coming down to the ideas that actually are probably best for your solution. And then you restate them. What I see myself doing is. So what I see myself doing is reducing production, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, you can see from these examples, but when you restate these ideas, then you can even make sure that they're in alignment. Now, the development, turning the ideas into solutions, evaluate, plan, take a good idea to make it great, consider novelty, use affirmative judgment. This is much more project oriented. This is where you're formulating, how you're going to develop and how you're going to make this thing happen. And then the actual implementation, where you formulate the plans and you identify those action steps, and then you make a plan. So this also, if you go back to thinking about the visual thinking and mapping it all out and formulating a plan, you can use these 2 things together very, very effectively. Yeah, and so here's an action plan tool, short-term, midterm, long-term. And again, what needs to be done, who's going to be doing it, by when, and who checks. In the next 24 hours, I will. So this is an action plan. And this is kind of fun. And this is the taking it forward. And this I've seen in a couple of different places, and that's the what, so what, now what. So at the end of this process that you've gone through, like what is the outcome? Why is that important? And what are you going to do next? I will just mention it here and add it on later, but another really fun place to get these types of facilitation tools is called liberating structures. So I've seen this what, so what, now what in liberating structures. I've seen open space in liberating structures, but it's really these helping your team become more innovative by having really fun, different discussions about things. Yeah, so again, so this is that design thinking, and then you're going to need to validate those assumptions. So you will, again, want to talk to your customers. And that when we get into the next one, I'm going to get a little deeper into innovation games and customer advisory boards and how you can use games and some of these exercises, tools, and techniques to get better feedback from your customers so that you can actually be building things that they love.